Hello and welcome to Basic Verbalization with Jared and George. Now to your hosts, Jared and George.
Hello and welcome to the very first ever podcast of Basic Verbalization. My name is Jared Jagler.
And I am his co-host, George Connolly. Today will be our first episode of the podcast, as Jared has already said. And throughout the podcast, we will begin by introducing each of us, some of our background in content creation on YouTube and other platforms, as well as some hobbies we have, so you can know a bit more about us. And then we will go on to some stories towards the end. Jared.
Thank you, George, for that wonderful introduction of the podcast, or the pod, as I like to refer to it. So yes, this will be a primarily storytelling-focused podcast. We will have other stuff talking about what's on our minds. However, if you are a lover of stories, as I and George are, you come to the right place. George?
Well, to introduce myself, I'm hoping that a couple of you are here from my main YouTube channel, which is just George Connolly, links in the description. The links will be in the description to not only my YouTube, Twitter, and Instagram, to Jared's Twitter and Instagram also. It is also important to note that any links that we do discuss, if we bring up any specific websites, products, videos, channels, they will be in the show notes in the description. You may hear my pen to paper throughout the podcast. That's because I'm writing down notes, as after the show, I will formulate show notes in which you can see whatever we went over throughout the podcast. Jared and I started making videos quite some time ago, I'd say 5 or 6 years ago. We've had many channels together, and this is just the next adventure in our little saga, if you will, and I'm really looking forward to it. Jared, how about your background?
I am of the YouTube channel Jared Jagler Movies. Hopefully, odds are none of you will come from there, but you know what? It's the thought that counts. George and I started making videos, and my first YouTube video was actually in this very room where we were filming this podcast, George's bedroom. And then from there, George and I expanded into comedy skits, each on our own individual YouTube channels. And then we created our very own channel together, the Bee's Knees Films, which, in my opinion, was a great success indeed. Now, the nature of my YouTube channel is not comedy anymore. It's more short film, sometimes news stuff, sometimes cinema stuff, things of the like. So now we are, again, onto a new adventure. Podcasting is new for me. I appeared on a few episodes of the George Connolly podcast. However, hopefully we're trying to get this episode onto iTunes, so maybe some of you are listening on iTunes, most on YouTube. But wherever you're listening, hey, maybe even SoundCloud, wherever you're listening, thanks for tuning in.
Yes, indeed. We thank you for tuning in as always. And as Jared brings up, SoundCloud and iTunes, whatever platforms this podcast is on, those will all also be in links in the description below. And we will be working on getting this out. Obviously, the podcast is quite small right now, but we will be working. We're thinking about weekly podcasts as of now, and the duration was anywhere. We're hoping for at least an over 20-minute podcast. I'm assuming this one will be over 20 minutes because not only are we each telling an individual story, which we will get into pretty momentarily, but we will also be getting into, obviously, the introductions, which we are just about finished with. So I think the first story is going to be told by Jared, and I'm just going to send it to him right now, and I will interject when I feel necessary.
Yes, please do interject. Right now, the date of filming is Friday, November 11th. November 8th, just 3 days ago, was one of the most important dates in our history of this decade, the 2016 presidential election. Now, my story will pertain to the presidential election. Now, don't worry, I won't be talking too much about Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton or whatever, negative emotions you associate with this time. But the 2016 presidential election is will end up being probably one of the most important events in my lifetime. So I'd like to spend some minutes in this podcast explaining to you. So the election started more than a year ago, probably a year and a half ago, upon candidates from the Republican and Democratic parties announcing their candidacy. This included Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump, Ted Cruz, Jeb Bush, Martin O'Malley, and most notably for me, Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont. So if you recall, the first announcement of Bernie Sanders' campaign came, he was in Vermont. It was a tiny, tiny press conference, probably only like 5 or 10 reporters, a few bystanders, but nobody expected Bernie Sanders to get the kind of support that he did as the campaign went on. Now, I found Bernie Sanders, I don't remember it that well, but in that summer, I'd heard about him on Facebook. Some videos were shared, but he was not a popular candidate at all. I used the website. It's one of those websites where you fill out your issues. Oh, it's called whoisidewith.com. Jory, you want to put that in the show notes?
I will do just that.
So it shows you who you agree with on all the issues, and I side with Bernie Sanders on 99%. I'm pretty sure. So I threw my support behind him, if you will. But at this time, I was not incredibly active in the world of politics. I followed the 2012 elections, but it was by no means on my radar as something I was intrigued in. I like sports. I like making videos. I like superheroes. I like television. But politics, it wasn't there. As the years went on, and the campaign started to pick up and increase in intensity, I started to follow it more and more closely. I, later on in that year, ordered a Bernie Sanders vinyl sticker from the website and slapped it onto my school-issued Chromebook. This is kind of significant because at that time, none of the primaries had happened yet, and people didn't really know who Bernie Sanders was, except that he was running as a Democratic candidate for president. And this is kind of me, coming out there and saying, this is how I'm involved in this election. I didn't really understand the significance of most of what was going on in our government at that time, but I had a lot more to learn, as would come to happen. So what would end up happening by the end of that year is that everyone from our school not everyone, most people from our school loved Bernie Sanders. He was incredibly popular. I'd still catch flack for the sticker, but it is what it is. And I started reading up. On yes, George.
And I think it is important to note that the high school we go to is in a very liberal part of a very liberal state. We are from Rhode Island, smallest state, and we were one of the more solid states that would vote blue in the 2016 election, and that's exactly what we did.
Yes, very correct. So what I did was I started to read up Washington Post, New York Times, NPR, all of that, and I started to form opinions. I started to form very strong opinions towards the Democratic Party, and I became super invested in every primary, every Super Tuesday that happened. I formed solid opinions on the Republican Party and platform as well, but those were not ones I exactly gave ringing endorsements to, if you will. So Bernie Sanders ended up not securing the Democratic nomination, as you may know, George. But I had my sights set on one thing during that year of Bernie Sanders' campaign run, and that was 1 Minute News. Now, George, you can explain this a little bit, are on our school-run morning show. Gives out announcements to the school in a television-like format every morning.
And essentially what this is, as Jared said, it's a morningly news show, and it's completely student-led. We have a teacher who advises it, but that is all he does. It is produced. It is the scripts are written. Everything is done by students, and there are a couple of different areas in which on-air reporters can report, being sports, weather, announcements, which is school announcements, like head down to the nurse if your name is called, stuff like that. and then there's a series called 1 Minute News. And what a lot of people enter on air, they want to be in a position where they are the head anchor of that field. So you're the head anchor of sports, you're the head anchor of weather, or you are the head anchor. This year I am serving as the head anchor, but Jared had his sights set on a 1 minute news position, which he has locked and which he has executed, what I would say, pretty flawlessly throughout the year so far. And it's crucial that he did a good job on it, because these first couple of reports he has done, as he said, this is one of the most prominent elections, one of the most important elections that America has faced in years, and it's a tough responsibility for him to take on that role, but I think he's done a great job. And obviously, you can tell by his reporting and the way he composes himself when he's reporting that it does indeed mean a lot to him.
Thank you, George, for that quite eloquent summary. I'll work backwards. I had my sights set at 1 Minute News. Senior had the position. His name was Theo, a role model of mine. Amazing kid. He was very well respected and well liked within the school for the job he did on 1 Minute News. And as my political opinions and interests grew stronger throughout the year, I realized that I didn't want to do sports on the show anymore. It didn't really have that much interest for me. I wanted to cover politics. So I talked to our advisor and Theo and our producers and asked, "This is what I want to do next year." And they agreed and they were excited for it. And so I didn't really face much competition because I was an incoming junior. But I started the year on 1 Minute News. There are some learning curves, still some learning curves, but covering 1 Minute News for the school is the most meaningful thing I've done on Sunrise, and I think it's one of the most meaningful things I've done in my high school life at Barrington High School, in my opinion. There's no job I would rather do on that show. Covering the news is it's a lot of fun, and this election season in particular was really important, not only for our nation, but it was important for me to do a good job covering it. Like George said, I put forth sample ballots for the kids and teachers to educate themselves on the issues. I gave them information to register to vote, information about the presidential candidates, the local candidates. I interviewed local candidates. I'm trying to get Governor Gina Raimondo of Rhode Island on the show. Hopefully that happens soon. But 1 Minute News has been a huge part of my life, and I look forward to developing the segment even more, which leads me into my next point, that aside from 1 Minute News, the way that this election has changed me is that I've become so invested and so interested that I am now pursuing a career in political science. Over the summer, I do have an internship in Washington, D.C., involving history. Then my number one choice for college is Georgetown University, and their very prestigious political science program, among other schools. Political science is something that I'm really interested in, and I definitely want to become, if not a politician, and a very influential one, then maybe like a speechwriter for politicians, or a lobbyist, or a campaign runner, or something of the like. And that's solely due to the presidential election.
Well, Jared, I think it's important for the viewers to know that this is the first time that you have even come out with this much detail to myself that you want to pursue a career in this. And I think it's so riveting to me how kids, even in, kids in our class, the class of 2018, juniors in high school right now, who will be getting out of college into the real world in 2022, how their simple experiences, I wouldn't call this election simple by any stretch of the imagination, but
it's quite lengthy.
Yes, these experiences are shaping what people want to do in their career. And although it may seem a little bit different, what my main career focus right now, obviously this is tentative, but I want to go into a management of hospitality and resort management, which is essentially, as the title says, managing a resort. And the way that I got into this was by staying at a really nice resort. And although that may seem a little bit odd and different, the resort itself was in Florida, and I love Florida, and I'm kind of sounding like Trump. I love Florida, great place. But It's stuff like that can really shape it, and we're definitely seeing it throughout the grade now. People are having a better idea. I'm already looking at colleges. You're already looking at colleges. So it's very interesting how this stuff can shape what potentially is the majority of your life in the future.
Yes, this presidential election, one of people's main complaints for it is that it was so long, so lengthy. Started over a year. Well, it started not last summer, the summer before that, but before that summer. So I'm not sure if that's exactly a year and a half, but it gave me a perfect amount of time to become interested, and then become engaged, and then become researched, and then become full on invested. And so, yes, as you may have guessed from the beginning of the podcast, I am not thrilled that Donald Trump was elected. And I'm not thrilled that the Republicans have gained the majority in the Senate and the House of Representatives. However, I wouldn't trade this election for the world, because Bernie Sanders changed who I am. The length of it changed who I am. Everything about it. It's made me who I am today. It's shaped my interests. It's shaped my future. And that's why the election of 2016 is probably the most important election of my life.
That's a very good story, and I think that it really just shows your genuine interest. Although the candidate you preferred did not win, that it ended up shaping you, and you wouldn't change the results for the world. I didn't want to get into politics too much, but I myself am speaking as a Republican. I affiliate with the Republican Party, but I did not. I've had to explain this multiple times because it's so many people ask, not to me directly, but the topic goes up. I didn't really support Trump. If it were up to me, my candidate that I preferred, like Jared's, wasn't even one of the two options. The man that I sided with at the very beginning was Rubio, who I'm happy to see found a spot in the Florida Senate over the election.
Yes, he was reelected to the Florida Senate.
Which I'm very happy about. And I also am a big fan of Chris Christie, and I'm happy to see that Trump is considering adding Chris Christie to some pretty powerful positions.
Yeah, I'm not happy about that. But, if you respect Chris Christie despite Bridgegate, then
I mean, yes,
all the luck towards you, George.
I know that obviously we have different views, and I think that it's powerful that we can overlook those. But I mean, I think obviously Bridgegate. Did you see the SNL skit where Bobby Moynihan played Chris Christie, and he kept on saying, "Oh yeah, it's water under the bridge." Oh, you did it again, Christie.
No, I missed that one, George. I should give it a look.
Link in the description to that.
George, add it to the show notes.
It's in the show notes. As long that will be added to the show notes with whoisidewith.com, and also the link to the Morningly show that Jared had brought up. And Jared, are you concluded with your story, or do you have anything else to wrap it up?
No, that's about it. If you are interested in talking politics with me, shoot an email to, I believe it's basic verbalization with jg@gmail.com, or, leave it in the comments. As long as it's not hate speech, don't leave hate speech in the comments. But other than that, that'll about do it.
All right, and now it's time for my story, which is not nearly as serious as Jared's story.
I'm very excited. You haven't told this one to me yet.
I haven't, and I've told you the basis of it. So this happened, I would say, in the summer of, I'm just guessing, 2013, 2014.
A good summer.
Not this summer, you're right. Is that what you said, not this summer?
No, I said a good summer.
Yes, I'm assuming it was a good summer. I like summer a lot. And essentially in, I'd say, early August, I was told by my family that we would be going to Saratoga, New York, which is it's a little bit of a hike from where we are, about 4.5 hours. And I came into it with a very closed mind. I would rather stay home, play wiffle ball, play video games, whatever I was doing that summer, than go on this trip with some family members to Saratoga. But Jared, I'm not sure if you know this about me, and the viewers certainly don't, but I love tours. I like historical tours. Like the Mount Washington, as I've said so many times. I've been on that tour, I exaggerate not, 3 times, because it's just a very interesting tour.
George, I was not aware of that fact. I know you're a big fan of Mount Washington. However, historical tours, I was unaware.
And Mount Washington is a place that I love. Jared's been there. He actually just posted a Time-Lapse Tuesday link in the description.
Yes, I did.
And It has a beautiful shot of the Mount Washington. If you don't know anything about the Mount Washington, it's a hotel in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. Beautiful place. Love it. Great. But back to the story. We went on a tour of Saratoga, and it's a very historically significant place. There was a Battle of Saratoga there quite a while ago. But essentially, the main reason we were there was to watch horses race, and I had never been big into horses.
Not the Kentucky Derby, I assume?
No, the Kentucky Derby is in Kentucky, Jared.
Oh, I was unaware.
This is in Saratoga, New York, which is also a very famous horse racing place. If you know the song "You're So Vain"
By Carly Simon?
I believe it's Carly Simon. It says, "And you flew your horse to Saratoga, and your horse naturally won."
Is Saratoga the home of a race where horses compete for the Triple Crown?
Yes, it is one of those 3 races. I'm not sure what it is called, but the race I was at was, I think, 2 weekends before one of the races for the Triple Crown. But anyway, so we got there at 6 o'clock in the morning for a tour of the racetrack, which was, back-to-back tours. I was in tour heaven, let me tell you. And we went on a tour. It was a very historical site. It was beautifully kept. The grass was nice. And we went to a picnic area at about noon to watch the 1 o'clock races. There were tons of races. There was a whole program. And then I saw a series of booths that people were lining up at, and there was a really long line, and I didn't know what those booths were exactly for. But then I asked my dad, "Hey Dad, what are those booths for?" And he said those are for placing bets on horses. And I came to this trip with $20. I think you guys know where this is going.
Was it a crisp bill or 2 10s or 4 5s?
Well, I'm not sure if that matters, but I would say a crisp 20, 1 bill. And although I was not 18, I had, I believe, my oldest cousin or my uncle or I don't know who, but I had someone place a bet for me, and it was a trifecta bet, and I'll remember this as long as I live because it was so distinct. The trifecta bet is essentially out of the 8 horses, you choose who comes in first, second, or third. And what happens with that bet is if you get all 3 right, the amount of money you bet is tripled as the trifecta goes. So I decided to put in, I think, 15 of my $20, and I got the bet right. So I got 45, a profit of 30. So now I was at $50. And as you can see, being a 12 or 13-year-old lad.
Daredevil.
Yes, I wouldn't call it a daredevil, Jared. I was not very daring at the time. But I was intrigued by this. And, I was 1 for 1. What could possibly stop me? So then I went for, this isn't the right name, but it was a trifecta, but with 4. It was 4 horses. And it'd be the same exact rules. You have to get 1, 2, 3, and 4. So I put in my $50, all of my money into guessing these 4. And as the race went on, if you haven't seen a horse race, they're very short.
Yes.
They go for, I wouldn't even say
45 seconds.
Yeah, not even a minute. And the 4 horses that I had called were in exact order as I had called them, and this would mean that my $50 would turn into $200, a profit of $180 since I had started the day. And my 4 horse came in 4th, my 3rd horse came in 3rd, my 2nd horse in 2nd, my 1st in 1st. The 1st and 2nd were neck and neck, or nose and nose, because, they're horses. And
is it a snout?
Jared, I'm not sure. You can look it up if you'd like.
Should I add it to the show notes?
No, I don't think that deserves to be added to the show notes. Let's stop referencing the show notes. We've been doing that far too often. And essentially, I thought that I had won the money, only to find out after an instant review that my 2nd horse had come in 1st and my 1st horse in 2nd, and I lost all my money and I had nothing else to bet. And that was my first and last exposure to gambling. I think I learned a really valuable lesson, Jared, and although that election may have shaped you, this horse race really shaped me. That's it. That's all I got.
George has a very intriguing story. Have you gambled since?
I mean, I've obtained scratch tickets from loved ones in, what are those called? Like grabs, where you trade gifts at a Christmas party.
I believe it's called Yankee Swaps.
A Yankee swap, yes, indeed. I've gotten, whenever I'm in a Yankee swap, I always try and trade down for a scratch ticket because they're usually in them. I don't recall winning anything big, maybe $1 or $2. But, I'm only about a year and a half away from being able to legally buy my own.
You can't legally buy your own when you're underage?
No, you have to be 18 to buy a lottery ticket.
George, I have a confession to make. I'm a usual shopper at Rite Aid, and I have a Plenty card. If you ever go to Rite Aid, they ask you if you have a Plenty card.
I know of that, yes. My brother used to work at Rite Aid.
So today, after I made my purchase, on my receipt, there was a code, and they said you can go to this website and fill out a survey and be entered to win
Yes.
$1,000.
Mm-hmm.
So I went and I filled out the survey, and it asked you to fill your age. It said, are you under 18? Are you 18 to 24? Are you 24 to 30?
Oh, no.
So on and so forth. And so
Don't tell me.
me being the smart lad that I am, I figured if I say that I'm under 18, they most likely will not enter me in the sweepstakes. And so I clicked 18 to 24 and clicked enter, and then it said, thank you for entering. Click here to show the terms and conditions. And I clicked the terms and conditions and said, you must be over 18 years old to be entered into the sweepstakes. And so if I win the prize money, I got to get my dad to claim it for me.
Yeah, your dad will become Jared Jaguar.
I'm a rule breaker.
Yeah, I'm not crazy on that rule because I know people who have won local races that are under 18 and they haven't been able to claim their prize money, which whatever. But on that note, we would like to thank you for joining us on episode 1 of Basic Verbalization. Jared, anything else to say?
Once again, please subscribe to our YouTube channels. Follow us on Twitter. I'm quite active on Twitter politically, among other things. Unless you don't like politics, then don't follow me on Twitter. So other than that, stay tuned for more. Subscribe on iTunes, follow on SoundCloud, subscribe on YouTube, share with your friends if you thought if you thought that this was a entertaining podcast, and if they are frequenters of podcasts. I'm quite a big fan of podcasts.
Let's talk about this for a second. What podcast do you listen to?
My favorite is Dear Hank and John with John and Hank Green of the Vlog Brothers, but in a close second comes This American Life from Chicago Public Radio.
Both of those podcasts will be linked in the description if you would like to check them out. And what's your method of listening to those? iTunes, YouTube?
I use iTunes because I do not have YouTube Red, so I can't close the app if you're up and down.
The majority of the podcasts I listen to, I get from YouTube.
Oh yeah?
I listen to, I'd say, 3 or 4 regularly.
See, I like to use iTunes because I can download it offline,
Yes.
and it doesn't use data when I'm out and about. Do you listen to podcasts while you are stationary at your home?
Yes, where I'm sitting right now, I usually listen to a podcast whilst doing homework that doesn't involve reading or writing. Because if I'm reading, I can't listen to something else. I can't even listen to music. But if I'm doing math homework, I can easily listen to a podcast.
I cannot do that.
Translating Spanish words or anything like that, I can do that.
I cannot do that.
Well,
I listen to podcasts in the car, on the bus ride to school, so on and so forth.
I wish that I had, when I run, I listen to podcasts, but I don't like to run, and I don't do it very often. But I try to listen to them before I go to bed, but I always fall asleep listening to them, and then I'm nervous that I'm gonna get choked by the headphone jack, and my whatever device I'm listening on is dead by then. But many great podcasts, this certainly being one of them, Jared.
Of course. It could be one of the greats. See us on the iTunes charts, please.
Oh yes, we're comedy, right? This is technically a comedy podcast under iTunes.
Subject to change. Not a whole lot of laughs in this one.
I hope you guys laughed a lot at Jared.
At our funny quips.
At Jared realizing he wants to be a political scientist.
A real
like
knee slapper. That one is.
So Jared, if you want to be a political scientist, does that mean that you put on a mask and gloves and a robe and you work on politics? You get it? It's like a joke, Jared. So funny, right, guys?
I believe we have a political science lab where we run experiments on. I was about to say something offensive.
Well, let's not do that. Are we about 30 minutes in?
We are exactly 30 minutes in.
Well, good for us and good for you for listening to the end of this podcast. Again, if you liked it, slap a like on it. And if you would like us to bring up any topics or you have any questions for us, leave them in the comment section below. This is a weekly podcast. And on that note, we would like you to subscribe to this channel, always be notified, push notifications on. Jared, anything else to add once again?
No, we should wrap this up.
All right, we do need to come up with some type of conclusion. What would you like that to be?
I don't know.
Wow, see, we should probably cut the podcast right now.
Tune in next week. Bye.
I think we should cut the podcast when I said we should cut the podcast now, and we can make that the ending for every podcast.